The audio content presented here dates back to the inception of my podcasting journey, spanning up to over a decade ago. Please note that the views expressed in this content reflect an earlier version of myself. As my perspectives have evolved over time, so have I. Listeners are encouraged to approach this material with awareness of its historical context. And now, on to what you've been waiting to hear.
Welcome to another episode of Mormon Discussion. I am your host, Bill Reel. I'm grateful to have you with us today. You can reach me by email at realmormon@gmail.com. That's REELMORMON@gmail.com. You can find this podcast on iTunes, but you're only going to find the most recent 20 or so episodes. So please check out the podcast at its host site, MormonDiscussion.podbean.com. That's Mormon Discussion, all one word, .podbean.com. You can also find us on Facebook under the name Mormon Discussion, all one word. Now to what you've been waiting to hear. Michael, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. And yourself?
Good, doing great. I'm glad to have a chance to sit down with you. Today, for my listeners, we've got Michael on from the Jediism Faith, and we're going to have an interview today and sit and talk about some of the ins and outs and aspects of this unique religion, which I think most people are going to be completely unaware of, and so this should make for a really fun interview. Michael, I wondered if you might start us off just sharing a brief bio of who you are so that my listeners can get a feel for you.
I'm a Jedi from one of the Jedi churches. Our church is called Temple of the Jedi Order. I've been a member for, I think, about 6.5 years now or something, so quite a while, but currently I'm a member of the council, which acts as the board of directors, and I'm also in charge of public relations, which is why I'm here talking to you now. So I'm the associate pastor in our clergy. There's another pastor who I work with, and we try to give some spiritual guidance to our seminary and the clergy that we have. But yeah, that's pretty much me.
Great. So you said you've been a member of the Jedi Faith for 6.5 years. Were you a member of another organized religion prior to that?
No, I wasn't. No, I was, for all intents and purposes, an atheist. I've never. My father was an atheist, so I've never been pushed into a religion at all. And I just came across it one day and thought, this kind of works for me, and I joined. Awesome,
that's great to hear. So maybe you can give us some history. How did the Jedi Faith or Jediism religion come to be? What caused it to be established?
Well, I mean, our church was founded in 2005, but the history does go back far longer than that. Of course, you had the original films, I think, in the late 70s, but generally as an organized sort of movement, it grew, I've been told, around the 90s with the development of the internet. But since the 70s, I know there are some members of our church, as well as some members of other organizations, have said they've sort of been following the Jedi ideal since then. But certainly that was quite sort of disparate around the world. They're quite spread out. But with the invention of the internet, it's allowed people to become quite to concentrate into online groups and things like that. So that's when it really got started in an organized fashion. People just they take the ideals that the Jedi represent, and they decided, this could work, so they tried to see how it would go, and it's going quite strong since.
Excellent. Sure. So what's the basic teachings that the Jedi Faith lives by? I mean, if you're a member, if say tomorrow I wanted to join the Jedi Faith, what is the basic teachings that I would subscribe to?
A rough sort of outline. I mean, I don't give like an authoritative view on Jediism. I am only a Jedi from a church, but so I'll try and give a rough kind of idea without sounding like I know everything, because I don't.
Sure.
But certainly one of the key aspects to it is a belief in the Force. The Force isn't particularly defined as, a definite thing. It's kind of more of an idea. It's sort of more left up to each individual, but if there's a belief in a force, then generally it sort of revolves around ideas of kind of sort of wisdom, understanding, and then compassion. Equality is a very strong feature of us. It's about just sort of trying to be a nice human being to others as well as to yourself. It's about finding your own way in the world and helping as many people as you can during that time.
Cool.
Yes. I'll try and give, that's a nice enough definition.
And I think that works. And I will guess we can maybe talk about this for just a second here. I know when people hear strange things, especially a faith that's kind of formulated after a movie, a set of movies that went so well, it may be a natural assumption of listeners to think that this is some kind of oddity religion where, you guys actually believe like Yoda's heading up things. But in reality, I hope that my listeners don't get that. And I know that you and I have already kind of talked about this, but what I see the faith as is a way for somebody to be spiritually connected and to have positive behaviors that they set as goals for their attributes, and to recognize a divine force in the universe that is good, but without having all the fluff that comes along with other organized religion that sometimes can, in the midst of making one feel included, can make another feel excluded. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, it would be very fair to say. We try to encourage, certainly perhaps not listed in our doctrine of our church, but in the way that we do things, we try to encourage a personal journey. So it's about you. We try to provide a structure, but ultimately it's down to the person, to do that. We just sort of give them something to work from, and then they have to discover it. We don't try to tell people what to do. We show people how to do it, you might say.
Yeah, and that's good, because I think most other organized religions would have some of both of those characteristics. And when you tell people what to do, sometimes that can cause some to not fit or not to belong. I do want to talk a little bit about what are the appealing aspects of the Jedi faith. I mean, what is going to be different about your religion or the faith of Jediism that others would say, hey, you know what, that's unique. That's something different that would appeal to me or draw me in that they're not going to find somewhere else.
That's a good question. People, when you think of Jediism, you think Star Wars, you think based from Star Wars. But that's not strictly true. We take the spiritual and philosophical concepts and mythological concepts that inspired Star Wars and do the same sort of thing. We don't use Star Wars, we use the concepts that inspired it. So George Lucas brought it into a new light, a new set of films which everyone loved. We're trying to bring the same things into a new set of kind of organized, structured churches or religions. We're trying to do the same sort of thing as he did, but for our church. So sure. We don't have a spiritual leader. There is no spiritual leader in Jediism, not like, for example, Jesus was to Christianity. No one person began it. And there's no one book which tries to rule it. So I'll draw another example. You don't have the Bible, for example, or the Talmud or the Quran. You don't have those books in Jediism. One of my friends here wrote quite recently that, Jediism is quite syncretistic. It brings in ideas from other religions, and it recognizes their importance and tries to use them. I'm trying to find an excellent quote he said, but it's along the lines of, the true syncretistic nature of Jediism is its recognition of the importance of all myths. So we recognize the importance of figures like Jesus and the Buddha and some of the teachings you can find in, the Bible. Some of it's quite excellent. And we try to look at everything because we don't have our own mythology. We don't have our own scriptures. The world is our scripture. All religions, are our sources of mythology. So we try to find everything and then bring that together and recognize it's important.
Awesome. Yeah. So if someone's a member of the Jedi faith, is there a place where they can congregate with other Jedis? Is there a place where they can go to? I don't want to necessarily use the word worship. I don't know what the way you're describing things, if that would be a good fit, but a place where you could join with people who believe the same way you do?
It depends on which organization you're a member of. Currently, there is, as far as I've been made aware, there is no Jedi temple anywhere in the world. Not in terms of, like a church. You might go to the center of your town and you find a church. dedicated solely to that purpose. There isn't one in Christianity. Sorry, there isn't one in Jediism. There's plenty in Christianity, but no. So we don't have a church, but certainly our temple is quite spread out. But there are other organizations. There's one based in Chicago, which has, plenty of, it's got quite a few members, but they're all in Chicago, so they meet up quite often and they do things together. But they might go to someone's house, and they might go on they might do some charitable work. I know that they quite often do that. So sometimes there's trying to be annual Jedi gatherings, Jedi meetings, where people will rent out sort of, maybe some part of a campsite, or I think a cabin was quite recent. They all rented out a cabin, and lots of Jedi all go there, kind of 40, 50 kind of people go there and start and congregate in that fashion, but more as kind of a Jedi holiday, you might call it, but not as an actual building, no.
Gotcha. You said you've been a member of the faith for 6.5 years, and prior to that, you were what you considered an atheist. How has the faith affected your life, and what kind of things have you seen in regards to changes within the way you interact with others and just deal with life on a day-to-day basis?
Certainly for myself, generally just as a side effect of being amongst people discussing philosophy, discussing religion, etc. I have found that it's increased my knowledge of those subjects quite a lot, and it's challenged my opinions, the way I argue or structure points. So certainly, just kind of in an academic sort of way, it has helped because I have learned. But for me personally, there are some practices such as kind of meditation, which I don't perform meditation kind of daily as an actual thing that I sit down and do, but it's allowed me to be kind of a lot calmer, to recognize how you can do an action and still be meditating and be very calm and composed. It's made me more compassionate, certainly understanding. I try to be more empathetic towards people, trying to understand their point of view, because in our church, Jediism has a strong focus on the individual, and the individual finding their own way. So, as a natural kind of reaction to that, you have to understand the ways of other people. So that applies not only to within my own church and my own faith, but of course to other faiths. So yes, it's made me certainly more sort of compassionate, understanding, empathetic, calmer. I don't really get that angry anymore. I'm less bothered by some of the terrible things that might happen to me. I try to let go of them. I don't have so much attachment to some of the, negative events that might happen to me. I don't worry so much. I kind of just get on and do it. So I'd say, yeah, it's helped me a great deal. I love it.
That's great. I want to ask too, do you see the Jedi faith, its teachings, and maybe I should preface the question with this one first. Obviously you're saying it's up to each individual kind of to maybe choose for themselves, and maybe that applies to this question as well. But what would the Jedi faith, if asked as a whole, what lies on the other side? What would the average member of the Jedi faith tell me?
In terms of kind of like an afterlife, like, for example.
Yeah.
One of the lines of the Jedi Code, which is a part of our doctrine, the last one, reads, there is no death, there is the Force, sometimes rephrased as death, yet the Force. I mentioned earlier there is no kind of authoritative view on what the Force is. So some people I know view it as energy. So some people view it as that, they're all energy. So when you die, your energy dissipates, and the energy never disappears. It just dissipates, but you're still there. Certainly for myself, and I think a few others, it's the idea that you aren't just your body. I'm not just me. I exist in other people as well. So, for example, I exist in this podcast, and when someone hears this podcast, they're hearing me. So if I were to die, this podcast would still exist. So part of me would still exist. In the same way, I'm the culmination of all my actions. So if I were, I hope not. I hope I don't die tomorrow, but if I were, then I would still live on. I wouldn't die completely. Even if someone had never heard of me, they would have been influenced by me, no matter how small, because I would have helped somebody, I would have taught somebody something, and they would have taught somebody else something. I might have made their day feel better, so whatever, they might be happy. So we're all a web of interconnectedness.
So the Jedi Faith is not and I guess I want to lead into this question, the Jedi Faith is not necessarily a standard by which one would achieve salvation in the afterlife, but rather a code or a spiritual set of ideas that we should live by in the here and now.
Yes, that would be an excellent way of talking about it. In the same way, it would be more. I wouldn't like to say kind of Buddhism, but perhaps I wouldn't like to categorize it as an atheistic view. But for example, perhaps humanists or atheists would say, I'm just trying to be a really good person. Jediism doesn't have a heaven or hell which you go to afterwards. We try to be really good people in the here and now.
I like that. And you mentioned Buddhism. That was one of the questions that the listeners had, which was, how does your religious doctrine in practice differ from Eastern religions such as Shintoism and Buddhism? And it sounds to me, and you can certainly add in, but it sounds to me like in some ways they're similar in that they essentially are asking you to live a righteous life that serves others and seeks to do good with the influence that you have. But are there ways in which you're different from those?
Oh, I don't want to mistakenly think something of one or the other and not know them in great enough detail. But certainly there's not, it's been described recently as, there's orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Orthodoxy is kind of thought of as right belief, and orthopraxy is thought of as right action. So certainly there are similarities between, we try to focus a lot on right action. But there are things, for example, we don't have any rules against eating meat. So you don't have to be a vegetarian, of course. Buddhists will still eat meat if given it. But as an example, there's nothing covering the eating of meat. I'm trying to think of other distinctive things about Buddhism. Chastity. There's of course only monks would be bound by that, but certainly there's nothing about chastity. Some of the people, well, I say some, many of the people are in relationships or married.
Sure.
So there's nothing along the lines of that. I'm just struggling on the spot.
No, I understand. I do like the fact you mentioned this whole orthodoxy and orthopraxy, and for my listeners who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints, or Mormon, that's gonna be something that's gonna apply to them, and in the sense that to be a good Latter-day Saint, one has to have certain beliefs. One has to essentially ascribe to certain ideas that one has a testimony in. But in reality, many Latter-day Saints who listen to this podcast may be, and maybe you don't know this, Michael, but my podcast is designed towards Latter-day Saints who are either struggling with doubt or are thinking deeper about things than perhaps the kind of simple ideas we get when we go to church on Sunday. And so as they're thinking along these deeper lines, they sometimes have questions that fall outside the normal things that we cover during a church service. And a lot of Latter-day Saints I've heard speak in the past talk about, hey, I'm not an Orthodox Mormon, but I certainly am orthoprax. And to take that idea, I certainly see within the Jedi faith this idea of, as you point out, kind of the beliefs are up to the individual, but the idea that you take every day and try to be good to others and serve mankind and kind of what's the Boy Scout motto, do a good turn daily, to essentially reach out and help others and to be a force for good within the universe. And I appreciate that, and I hope that my listeners will be drawn to that as well. I want to share with you a couple of other questions that listeners to this podcast sent in. You mentioned earlier that the Jedi faith does not have any kind of scripture, that essentially the world is its scripture. What is the Jedi faith's view of other religions' scripture? I mean, would you, if a member joined the Jedi faith and they still wanted to subscribe to the Bible as a sacred text, would that be permitted? Is that something that's allowed, or are there lines drawn on those kinds of things?
We do. I know one Jedi, they believe in God and the Force. there are, because Jediism is very, as I said earlier, syncretistic, kind of brings in lots of the other things from other faiths and other ideas. There are people who come here as Christians and still maintain lots of their Christian practices. It would simply be impractical and probably unethical for us to say, no, how dare you? You must be a Jedi. That would create the feeling of the in and the out group, which is what we are entirely trying to avoid.
Right.
We're very, I don't want to say, maybe I'm trying to think of a better word, but kind of loose. We're not that strict in terms of, what must be. Because we try to focus, if you're a really nice person and you're doing great, awesome. So if you wanted to still think of the Bible as a sacred text, I think I perhaps might not use the word sacred, but there are some amazing things in the Bible, for example, and a lot of the Bible is a cultural history of Judaism, certainly the Old Testament. So some of it's really quite interesting. It's quite amazing to read, and if someone wants to use that, then that's fine. I mean, mention orthodoxy. We have a focus. We have a strong focus on orthopraxy, but certainly that doesn't mean you can believe anything. We have. Right. I can only talk for our church. Our view is generally, if you want to call yourself a Jedi, okay, we have nothing to do with you. We just live with ourselves in our own church. We try to keep a distance because we don't want to feel as though we are an authority. Certainly, within our church, we have a doctrine, and there are boundaries. It's a huge field that you can be in, but the field, has a fence around it. If you want to kill people, obviously, we're against that. But we're very, if you bring the Bible with you and think it's a sacred text, you could be on the opposite side of the field. To me, maybe you could call me an Orthodox Jedi. But as far as I'm concerned, we're still in the same field. You are still a Jedi, and that's absolutely fine. So we certainly don't ban, people considering scriptures as being sacred or holy.
So if a person subscribed to a different faith, say they're whether a Christian or Muslim or whatnot, and as long as they can fit whatever they're bringing with them into the Jedi Code or the rules or the ideas that a Jedi would subscribe to, then there's not enough conflict there that one would be excluded from membership. But that wouldn't make up that wouldn't make up a normal Jedi in the sense that you're going to find a lot of variation from member to member. It's not like everybody's bringing their past religion with them, but if a small group of them did do that, that wouldn't be enough to exclude them from the faith.
Absolutely not. No, they'd be just as included as anyone else.
Great. One listener asked this, and so I'm going to ask, and I'm going to kind of chuckle as I ask it, but I recognize that this is in the way we're kind of describing the faith. This is more of a humorous side note and not really applicable. But do Jedis use the Force?
It's perfectly fine. Kind of, when you think of Jediism, you think of Star Wars, or Jedi, you think of Star Wars. That's perfectly to be expected. So, this question makes perfect sense. We get asked it quite often. It's a very valid reason. It would depend what you mean by use the Force. Can I lift up objects and throw them? No. That would be awesome. I'd love to be a wizard, but I'm not a wizard. So I can't use the Force, in that sense. For me, it's more an understanding of the interconnectedness of everything. It's very similar, for example, to Zen Buddhism and some of the schools in Mahayana Buddhism. So do I use the Force? Perhaps not, but I use my understanding of the Force to understand other things, understand things I might not otherwise, think to realize without it. If you understand what I mean.
I do. And so you're not waving your hand in front of anybody and saying these are not the droids you search for.
No, I wish. That would be very funny, but unfortunately, no. No Jedi, can do that at all.
Right. And I imagine, just like in any faith, you might have some extreme members who tend to maybe focus more on some of those concepts out of the movies in a direct association. I mean, is that fair to say? I mean, I know within Mormonism there are people on both sides of the spectrum as well as a lot of people in the middle. I assume the Jedi faith would fall into that as well, and there might be a few a few members of the faith who maybe take the movies way too serious. Does that make sense?
Certainly, some of them do. I mean, certainly our church from the very beginning has had a very strong focus. I think it says on the very front page, we are not Star Wars role players. We don't use Star Wars as, scripture or anything. So, in my kind of immediate knowledge of how Jedi, my immediate circles of Jedi, I certainly know we don't really have those sorts of people, but then we don't begin with that. We kind of try to discourage it from the very get-go. But that's just the way that our church is structured. As I said, there are other organizations, there are other Jedi, and certainly some of those, they might not use, they'll have, I don't want to say they have a strong focus on the fiction, but they might use the fiction a lot more in their training material.
I was going to say, that's an important note, too, that, you've made this comment several times. There are multiple Jedi groups or Jedi faiths. Is that a way to say it? I know within Mormonism, there are several break-off groups from the mainstream Mormon church. And so it sounds like in a similar way, it's not like all Jedi subscribe to the same charter or the same group. It sounds like there are multiple groups whose rules may differ slightly, whose ideas and concepts may differ slightly from group to group.
Yeah, maybe I'm saying it too much, but certainly I'm just trying to. I'm just sort of making sure that, for one thing, people don't think I'm speaking for everyone, because I'm not. It's just more kind of me covering myself.
Sure.
I'm not an authority, and we aren't the only church. We're a very large church, certainly. One of the largest, but not the only one. I just don't want, if any other Jedi hear this, I don't want them to think, oh, how dare he speak on my behalf. I'm
right.
a Jedi. I'm only a Jedi.
Gotcha.
But,
no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, in our training material, we use people such as Alan Watts, Jiddu Krishnamurti, Joseph Campbell, whereas in some of the other, we don't mention Star Wars. Kind of, I think it's mentioned maybe once as an aside in our initial training. And certainly some other people, they might say, read this Star Wars book from the extended universe or whatever. I've never read the extended universe. I have no interest in reading it. That's not my Jediism. But it might be their Jediism. And even some people prefer to think of it as a philosophy. Some people prefer to call themselves as Jedi realists, who don't like the idea of a Jedi religion, but like the idea of the Jedi. So, there's still a lot of variation, and some people prefer using the fiction more than others, but certainly, no, I've never read any of the books or anything like that.
Gotcha. So, members of your faith, how do they keep in contact with each other, or how do you guys get information out to them, or encouragement, or reminders? How does that, is it just by email and online?
Generally, yes. We're, because we don't have our own church, our own building, we don't have our own building that we all kind of congregate to. We are a corporation, a non-profit corporation that was incorporated in Texas at our founder's house. But that's not a building that we congregate to. That's just for corporation matters. So mostly it's all done through the websites that we have. There's a messaging system. There are forum posts. There's a rather large forum on there, and there are some other. We have our own Facebook group, although that's used more just to direct people to the website. It's not generally for announcements. But it's primarily through things like emails, messaging. Certainly because I'm on our council, our board of directors, I generally have sort of the phone numbers of the other members, like, oh God, I have to contact you quickly, or
Right.
So we do have our own kind of Skype groups, and people, we have a Google Plus Hangout which people go into quite often. But primarily, it is all done through online. Though we do meet up occasionally in Arizona, several times I think it was Arizona. I don't want to get it wrong, but a few times last year in London in the UK. So it's primarily online, but there are still offline meets, as it were, or contacts.
If your faith got big enough, I mean, would building physical structures to congregate in, would that be something that would be a goal, or is that not even something that the Jedi faith would desire?
It would certainly happen. I mean, I don't want to say it's inevitable. It may never happen, but certainly there are some members who would say, some of them maybe kind of nearing perhaps towards retirement. They would say, I would turn my house, or I would buy some land, and I would create, my own kind of Jedi temple. Mm-hmm. But there's no big push towards it. I mean, we're still quite young. Certainly, our church is we're entering into I think it's about 8 years now. So really still relatively young. And we're still figuring out things like our training, our clergy, some of our liturgy. So there's so much more work to do there that we don't just kind of we don't try to approach the idea of a building like as an official thing. Though of course, if members want it, they'll go out and do it, and that's absolutely fine. But there's no big push towards one, though. It'll probably happen eventually.
What is your specific group, and maybe if you can speak at large to Jediism as a whole, what is the membership of your specific group and perhaps the Jedi faith entirely?
I've actually just written about this somewhere else. Demographics. It can be hard to tell. You have to understand, for us, that we have active and inactive members, what we call active and inactive members. What that means is, if someone signs up to our forum, they do the oath, they fill out the application to become a legally recognized member of our church, then they are a legally recognized member of our church. And of those, we have, I would say, approximately kind of 2,000 over the last 8 years or so. But of those 2,000 that are still actively practicing, because think of it as someone being baptized as a Christian when they're younger, but then not being a Christian when they grow up. Whether they change their mind or whatever, that sort of thing happens. So I would say perhaps at most maybe kind of 200 sort of active members, which is we are one of the largest. Jediism is certainly quite small. I would say worldwide, no more than 5,000. You've probably heard of the Jedi census. Have you? I don't know if you
have. I have not.
The sense. Yeah, I think it's the Jedi census phenomenon. I think it's listed as an article on Wikipedia.
Oh, when people are asked their faith, and rather than list anything else, that's what they're putting down.
That was done as a campaign in 2001 and again in 2011, and something on the order of there was hundreds of thousands of Jedi kind of on the census, but that we don't count that as anything as representative of anything regarding the actual numbers. There are not hundreds of thousands of Jedi. Otherwise, you ask the question, well, where are they? Right. you would see them. You'd see them around, quite often. There would be buildings because there'd be hundreds of thousands of people, but it's small, so certainly. That's why I'd say maybe kind of 5,000 people at most worldwide. It's hard to put a count on it because there's no big church or there's no like global gatherings or anything like that. But I'd say maybe that.
It's interesting you say it that way when you talk about active and inactive, and maybe just for me to throw a little bit of information your way. The Mormon Church is similar in that we claim that we have 15 million members. That's how many people have been baptized into the faith. But we're probably lucky if the ones who are still going to church on Sunday with any kind of regularity, maybe 5, 6, 7 million tops. And so there's maybe a 30 to 40% activity rate. And so I certainly understand that drop off. That makes sense. And it's not, I don't think my listeners are going to be like, oh, so many people leave the Jedi faith. I think they're going to understand that happens within Mormonism as well as any other faith. People, get excited. They sign up for something. They agree to do something, and then they go back to doing other things or kind of fall by the wayside, or for whatever reason, they disbelieve from that point forward and choose another path.
I don't want people to take the words active and inactive as, fixed literal meanings. I mean, kind of in general, sort of, because, as I said, because we're online, it's easier to kind of gauge it, because we can see how many people kind of post on forums. But even if they leave, they might still be acting like a Jedi would be acting, we just can't document it. So, it's hard to kind of tell that, so don't take active and inactive as literal, they're not on the website, therefore they're not Jedi. Well, they might be Jedi, we just don't know because they're not telling us.
So another question that I want to ask then, Michael, is does your faith, you talk about having clergy, I have three questions kind of, but they all go together. Is your clergy paid? Do you require donations? And do you ask for donations, which obviously can be different than requiring them? Maybe if you could speak to those three ideas of financially how the church works.
Okay, that's very fair. Everything is done voluntarily at our temple. We all have our own lives, so no one gets paid. I don't get paid. I'm a member of the council. I don't get paid. I'd love to get paid, but I donate. In fact, I donate my money. I donate some of my money to the temple, as do many of the councillors. So no one in our temple gets paid at all. Will that change in future? Who knows? If it gets to a point where we are required to 24/7 be working, then quite possibly. But we don't have enough money to pay people. So that idea is completely, that doesn't really come into it at all. Are donations required was one of the other questions. We don't require donations from anyone. I mean, obviously we do have a donate button. There is a PayPal, or people, could send a check or something. But we don't go around asking money of people. We sit here and we kind of go, hey, this is us. Come be a part of us if you want. That's kind of how the church works. And it's the same for donations. We have yearly reports. They started in 2012, but we kind of go. We have in there our financial information. We go, hey, here's our financial information. Donations would be nice, but we don't require them. We don't want. They say money is a necessary evil. It is necessary, but and it is arguably quite evil. But we want to reduce our reliance. We don't want people to feel as though they have to pay to be a member, and we certainly don't want people to bribe us to getting a higher rank by donating more money. Absolutely not. So we try to sort of keep the financial side kind of on the down low. We can hey, we have expenses to pay. Here's how much money we've made. Here's how much money it's costed us in a year. If you want to donate, that's great. But we don't kind of require it. It's a very passive kind of donating scheme, if you want to call it that.
Sure. I want to ask this question. This came from a listener, and I want to ask it this way. If another set of movies come out for Star Wars, which I think are in the works, if I'm not mistaken, if there are new principles found in those movies, does the Jedi Faith feel obligated to add those, or would they have to mesh with the current ones to be, in other words, obviously there could be some things in the movie that, a Jedi does that all of a sudden they bend the rules or break the rules to accomplish something which would be totally against kind of the code you've created. Do you feel, is there an obligation there within your faith to still add those, or would they have to still be righteous or good and wholesome behaviors?
It would entirely depend on the extent to which the fiction of the Star Wars universe influences your idea of Jediism. I mean, I can tell you that when the 3 films are released, nothing in our temple is going to change. They don't have any bearing on us. So people might talk about them more. We might get an increased number of members because people have, they've heard Jedi, so they hear Jedi religion, so they join us. But nothing, I don't want to say substantial, but nothing substantial will kind of change. But if you, certainly it would depend on the extent to which you feel the fiction influenced your own beliefs of what Jediism was. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example from, I think there's Luke Skywalker. He kills some guards or something at the beginning of episode 6 in Jabba's palace. I think it is. He kills some guards, and you might go, oh, that's evil. But then you sort of have to kind of understand it. You don't take one event and then and then like extrapolate that out for how you should behave in every single event. It's right. more you trying to gauge what they're about, because maybe he has very good reasons to kill those people. He probably does. He has to sneak in without being detected. So, and they're maybe they're evil people, so it's okay. You kind of try to get context. You have to understand the context that it's in. You wouldn't take the one event by itself. You'd understand what's going on, so you would understand he is being good or whatever. So it's unlikely that they would differ from it that greatly, but of course, if they did, if all of a sudden Jedi all became evil, then people might go, wait, what? And that might really suddenly change the way that people feel about calling themselves a Jedi, when all of a sudden the Jedi aren't good, the Jedi are, murdering puppies. Right. But as I say, it depends on the, how much you use the fiction to determine the values of your own beliefs.
That makes a lot of sense. And I want to end maybe just making a comment and then giving you kind of a chance to maybe share any final thoughts that you've got. But here's what I kind of felt as I was preparing for this interview and looking a little bit on the website, reading, I don't know if it was your group or another Jedi group, but I was reading the different, I don't know if you want to call them laws or rules, but they were the kind of beliefs that Jedis would hold. Essentially that there is a force in the universe and that Jedis, all these positive things. And here's what I came up with. As a Latter-day Saint, as a Mormon, who is aware of members of our faith who struggle, and certainly being aware of in a general and a larger scale, people within Christianity or any other organized religion who become dissuaded to the beliefs. They essentially have lost faith or lose belief, and they no longer can hang on to what they have, but yet they want to maintain a level of spirituality. They want to maintain those principles that they still feel are good and right. I really felt like your faith offers people a place to go where they can essentially hang on to all the good they've gotten up to that point, but gives them a safe place to go if they no longer feel like they can be part of the faith that they currently belong to. And so I want to just say thank you for being on today and appreciate so much you sharing some of these ideas and ideals. I'll put links up when this episode is published and airs. I'll put links up so people can check out your site and other informational places that speak about your faith, and of course the ones that do it in a respectful way. But what are your thoughts? I mean, for those out there maybe who are considering changing a church or changing a faith, or maybe even considering withdrawing completely from all belief in anything spiritual, what are some thoughts you might have to those individuals?
One of the things, in fact, a friend of mine on the temple, we were talking about homosexuality, and he told me when he joined, by chance, he had seen one of my posts on a Google search, and he clicked onto it, and he found out about us. And then he joined because of that, because, we're very accepting, for example, of homosexuality. I mean, some of the members on the council are, gay or bisexual, so, we have no problems there, or kind of, women being members of the clergy. It's a complete non-issue for us. We don't even have an opinion. So, it's not controversial in the slightest. So a lot of people, some of the more kind of traditional views on, like, sex or contraception, they feel very disillusioned with some of the positions that some churches have. But then we don't have like that baggage, as it were. So a lot of people, they feel very liberated coming to us. But on that note, people shouldn't be ready to change a religion because they expect like a reward. If someone says, you can join us and you can get into heaven if you just say you're one of our members, they go, oh, excellent, well, I'll join that religion because I'm going to get into heaven, something like that. You shouldn't become a Jedi because you're expecting, some kind of reward. We don't really give you anything. It's about you finding your own way, which is why so many people feel quite liberated. And it's something we're trying to keep. We don't want to, as I say, talking about spiritual authority, we don't want to become an authority on what you should be, because in trying to conform, it just creates an internal struggle, and you'll feel horrible. You'll have a schizophrenic crack up because you're trying to conform to something which isn't you, which is why we try to promote you. You being you. So I mean, if that sort of thing kind of appeals to people, generally it does, but a lot of people don't know about us. Not to say everyone would instantly join us, but we just offer a different way of doing things, and for some people that might work. I mean, some people such as yourself, you might want to stay a Mormon, and we can mutually respect each other because we're under no obligation to be one thing or the other. So yeah, it's just about finding your own way.